The package was waiting for me when I got home. A plain brown box, sitting dead center on my front porch like it had been placed there with careful, deliberate hands. No return address, no postage stamp. Just my name, scrawled across the top in tight, shaking handwriting I didn't recognize. I stood there for a long time, groceries dangling from my hands, a sour, buzzing unease settling in the pit of my stomach. The air around me felt wrong, too still, like the moment before a thunderstorm when everything holds its breath. I already knew. Somehow, before I even touched it, I knew. I set the groceries down, knelt, and pressed my hand against the box. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if it had been sitting in the snow rather than on a sunlit porch in the middle of June. The cardboard was damp, and something inside shifted slightly, the faintest rustle of fabric on fabric. A memory flashed across my mind. Jack laughing as he tore the wrapping paper off a hideous mint green sweater Mom had knit for him. "You expect me to wear this?" he'd teased, but he did. He wore it all the time, right up until the day he vanished. My hands shook as I peeled the tape away. The flaps opened with a soft sigh. Inside was Jack's sweater, the same mint green cable-knit monstrosity, worn thin and stained at the cuffs. The smell of damp earth and something older, fouler, rose up and filled my nose, made my stomach clench. And lying atop the sweater was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no explanation, just a line of text printed in a heavy, jerking hand. "Do you remember the window behind him that night at the party?" The world tilted slightly. I stumbled back, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the rest of the world. I hadn't thought about that night in years. The last night I saw Jack before he disappeared. There had been a party. A bunch of high school seniors, drunk and laughing, crammed into Casey Miller's parents' barn. Jack had shown up late, pale and jittery, kept glancing over his shoulder toward the big, grimy windows that looked out over the field behind the barn. I remember teasing him about it. "What, afraid of the dark?" He hadn't laughed. Now, clutching the letter, I felt something unfurl inside me. A memory. A fear I hadn't let myself examine too closely back then. There had been something outside that night. A shape, pressed against the glass. Watching. I barely slept that night. The sweater sat on the kitchen table, untouched, like a corpse waiting for burial. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jack's face, not the way he looked in his school photos, but the way he'd looked in the last moments I saw him, scared, hollowed out, almost wrong. The next morning, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered on instinct. Static hissed for a moment, then a voice I hadn't heard in a decade crackled through. "Kara." My blood ran cold. "Jack?" The static swallowed the line before I could hear anything else. I didn't go to work, didn't shower, didn't eat. Instead, I dug through the old plastic bin in the back of my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. The one labeled JACK. Inside, I found the old photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and my own scrawled notes from when I had obsessed over his disappearance. I found the photo of him at Casey's party, standing awkwardly in his green sweater, squinting at the camera. And in the background, through the window behind him, a smudge, a blur. I zoomed in until the image pixelated, but I could still make out the rough shape. Too tall, arms too long, and where its face should have been, just a smear of darkness. The police had searched for Jack for months back then. They'd combed through the neighboring towns, dredged the river, sent dogs into Donner Woods. All they found was a torn strip of his pants, bloodied and clinging to a broken tree branch at the wood's edge. They said he must have run away, maybe gotten lost in the forest and succumbed to the elements. They didn't see the mittens. The mittens had started appearing in 2005, 3 years before Jack vanished. Always the same. Child-sized, thumb torn open, yellow stain at the base. Every month, like clockwork, they'd appear on our doorstep. No footprints leading to or from the house, no signs of who left them. Jack always claimed they were for him. He would snatch them up before anyone else could touch them, hoard them in his room. After he disappeared, the mittens stopped, until 3 weeks later, when a final pair appeared beneath his bedroom window. Only this time, they were adult-sized, the ones Mom had given him for Christmas the year before. The ones he never wore because he said they were too tight. And in the mud beneath the window, footprints, leading away from the house into the woods. I thought about calling the police, telling them about the package, the sweater, but I didn't. They wouldn't believe me. They never had. Instead, I booked a flight. Back to Solomon Falls. Back to the house I swore I'd never set foot in again. Back to the woods that swallowed my brother whole. The flight landed at dusk. The air was thick with the scent of rain and something else, something metallic. I stepped off the plane into the tiny terminal and spotted a man waiting near the baggage claim, holding a sign with my name, Jamie Brown. I hadn't seen Jamie since high school. He looked older, thinner, his eyes shadowed with something I couldn't quite name. Still, I forced a smile and approached. "Jamie," I said, "thanks for coming." He smiled back, but it was too tight, too strained. "Of course," he said. "We've missed you, Kara. It's good you're finally coming home." His voice was right, his face was right, but somewhere deep in my bones every instinct screamed, "This is not Jamie Brown." The car ride from the airport to Solomon Falls stretched longer than I remembered. Jamie's truck rattled and wheezed along the cracked highway, headlights slicing through a mist that had crept in with the dark. Pines crowded the edges of the road, leaning too close, their skeletal branches clawing against the sky. For a while we didn't speak. I kept stealing glances at him, at his two thin hands gripping the steering wheel, the slight twitch of his left eye, the way he blinked too slowly, like someone not used to blinking at all. It looked like Jamie, sounded almost like him too. But there were little things, tiny microscopic errors that screamed at me from the back of my mind. He talked about memories that weren't real, like playing tag in the woods behind my house in 1996. Except I hadn't met Jamie Brown until 3 years later in Mrs. Garvey's freshman English class. I should have said something right then. Instead, I smiled tightly and nodded and kept my mouth shut, every muscle locked and ready to bolt. We passed the old gas station at the edge of town, long abandoned, its windows boarded up. The sign still clung to the rusted awning by a few stubborn bolts swinging in the wind. "Fill her up." Cold pop inside. Jamie, or whatever he was, pointed to it. "Remember when Jack climbed up there?" he said, chuckling low. "Got stuck on the roof. You cried until your mom got the ladder." I stiffened. Jack never got stuck on that gas station roof. That was me. I broke my arm falling off that roof the summer after 3rd grade. Jamie had the story half right, wrong enough to set every nerve in my body alight. As we crossed into Solomon Falls proper, the town unfolded before us like a crumbling painting. It looked smaller, sadder than I remembered. The diner's neon sign flickered feebly. The library stood dark, windows papered over with foreclosure notices. Even the high school looked like it was sagging inward, defeated. At the center of it all loomed Donna Woods, black and vast, a wall of trees wrapped in mist. Jamie's, the thing's eyes flicked toward them as we passed. "Place still gives me the creeps," he said. "You'd have to be crazy to go in there after dark." The words sounded casual, but I caught the way his hand tightened on the wheel, saw the way his throat bobbed with a nervous swallow. For a second, just a second, his face shimmered, like heat off asphalt, like something struggling to hold its shape. We pulled up in front of my childhood home. The sight of it punched the air from my lungs. It hadn't changed much, still the same weathered blue siding, the sagging porch, the crooked fence half-eaten by ivy. But the windows were wrong, dark, black, gaping like empty eye sockets. I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the thick night air. Jamie stayed in the truck, engine idling. "You need help getting inside?" he called. I hesitated. "No," I said. "Thanks." I forced myself to the front door. The key shook in my hand as I fitted into the lock. From the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement, just beyond the tree line, where the backyard melted into the forest, something tall and thin, standing still, watching. When I turned, there was nothing there, only the trees, only the mist. The door groaned open on rusty hinges. The smell hit me first, dust, mildew, and something sour that made my stomach clench. I flicked the light switch. Nothing, of course. The power had been shut off years ago. I picked my way inside by the weak glow of the porch light. The house felt heavier somehow, like the walls were pressing inward, suffocating. Photos still lined the hallway, faded, curling at the edges. Mom and Dad's wedding picture, Jack at 6 years old, missing his two front teeth. Me in my high school graduation gown, Jack grinning beside me. I lingered on that last photo. His face looked so alive, so normal. Not like the way I remembered him that final week, quiet, skittish, always glancing over his shoulder like he expected something to come crashing through the window. I dumped my bag in the living room and dug out my flashlight. The house creaked and groaned as I moved through it, the floors swelling and shrinking with the night air. Every few steps, I thought I heard something else. A whisper, a soft shuffle, the brush of fingertips along the wall. But when I turned, there was never anything there. Just the empty house, just me. At least, that's what I told myself. Jack's bedroom door was still nailed shut. Dad had hammered the boards across it the day after the funeral. "We have to let him rest," he'd said, voice breaking. I ran my fingers over the rough wood. The final pair of mittens, the adult-sized ones, had been found lying beneath this window. I could still see the faint, muddy footprints on the floorboards outside the door if I looked hard enough. The sheriff had brushed it off, said it was probably kids playing a prank. But I knew better. Jack's footprints had gone out the window that night. Someone or something had left, or come in, or both. I found Mom's old crowbar in the hall closet. It took some effort, but I managed to wrench the boards free, nails squealing in protest. The door creaked open. The air inside was stale and cold, as if the room had been sealed inside a freezer all these years. Jack's room was frozen in time. The same faded Star Wars posters, the same battered desk, the same twin bed, covers rumpled as if he had just slipped out of them moments ago. I stepped inside. The floor moaned under my weight. My flashlight swept across the room, lingering on the closet door, closed. I reached for the handle. My fingers brushed something cold, something wet. I jerked my hand back, heart thudding. There, smeared across the closet door, was a handprint, small, child-sized, but the fingers were too long, the palm too narrow. And etched into the center of the handprint, like a brand, was a crude symbol, a mitten, torn thumb, yellow stain at the base. From somewhere outside, in the deep woods beyond the house, a sound rose, a high, keening wail, not human, not animal. Something caught between the two, something calling out, calling me. The scream from the woods still echoed in my ears. It was fading now, swallowed by the mist, but the silence it left behind was even worse, thick and humming, with something unseen, something that knew I was here. I backed away from the closet door, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The symbol in the smeared handprint, a mitten, thumb torn, was too deliberate to be some accident. It was a message, or maybe a warning. I told myself to leave the room, to run, to slam the door shut and nail it back up like Dad had. But my body betrayed me. Some deeper, stubborn part of me needed to know. I needed to see what Jack had left behind. I wrapped my sleeve around my hand and wiped the closet handle clean before gripping it. The knob turned with a dry screech and the door creaked open. Inside, it wasn't what I expected. No clothes hanging from a rack, no piles of junk. Just a single object, placed carefully in the middle of the closet floor. A shoebox. Old, battered, the cardboard stained dark around the edges like it had been left in a flood. I knelt slowly, my heartbeat a drumbeat against my ribs. Jack had scrawled something across the lid in thick black marker. "If you're reading this, it's already watching." My mouth went dry. A rustling noise stirred behind me, barely there, like a whisper. But when I whirled around, there was only the empty room. The flashlight beam quivered over the bed, the walls, the posters. No movement. Still, the feeling of eyes boring into my back didn't leave. Gripping the shoebox tighter, I dragged it out of the closet and sat cross-legged on the floor. The lid peeled off with a faint tearing sound. Inside, there were several items carefully packed. A crumpled Polaroid photo, a battered notebook, a jagged piece of something, bone, with strange carvings. And at the bottom, a scrap of fabric. One of the old mittens, thumb-torn, yellow stains stark against the grey wool. I touched none of them at first. I just stared. The photo lay on top, warped and faded, but still legible under the beam of my flashlight. It showed Jack, standing in front of Donna Woods. He was smiling, but something about the expression made my stomach twist. His eyes weren't quite right, too wide, too flat, like a doll's, and behind him, just visible in the tree line, was a shape. It didn't have a face, didn't even have a clear form, just a suggestion of height, of limbs bent the wrong way, of something that shouldn't exist. I swallowed hard and set the photo aside. The notebook's cover was cracked and stained. Jack's handwriting filled the first page in frantic, messy scrawls. It started with the mittens. They weren't just presents, they were markers. Something choosing me, marking me. Page after page detailed things I didn't want to believe. Jack seeing things outside his window, hearing his name whispered from the woods, dreams of our mother calling to him with half a face. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. It all mirrored my own memories too closely to dismiss. One entry stood out, dated 2 days before he disappeared. I saw it. For real this time, it wore my face. It stood in the woods and smiled at me with my face. Dad didn't believe me. Kara didn't believe me. But I think she saw it too once. It's getting closer. It wants to wear me like a jacket. I have to leave. I have to hide somewhere it can't find me. My hand trembled as I turned the page, but it was blank. The rest of the notebook was empty. As if Jack had run out of time, I looked back at the piece of bone. On closer inspection, it wasn't bone at all. It was wood. Old, blackened, brittle, and the carvings weren't random. They were the same symbol. The mitten. Always the mitten. I packed everything back into the box, save for the Polaroid, which I tucked into my jacket pocket. My brain felt like it was buzzing, hot and tight with fear and confusion. I needed air. A soft tapping sound froze me in place. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window across the room, the one facing the backyard, where the woods loomed just beyond the fence. I forced myself to turn. At first, there was nothing, just mist swirling against the glass. But then, fingertips, grey, long, wet-looking. They slid down the window pane slowly, leaving greasy trails behind. I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs hard enough I thought it might break through. The flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. Darkness swallowed the room. In the faint light from outside, I saw it more clearly now. Something standing just beyond the window, tall, wrong. It leaned closer, pressing its too thin face against the glass. The features were smeared, melting like candle wax under a flame. For a horrible second, it looked like Jack, then like Jamie, then like someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize. The thing smiled, wide, too wide, teeth sharp and gleaming. It raised one long-fingered hand and tapped the window again. Tap, tap, tap. My legs finally obeyed. I tore out of the room, down the hallway, slamming the bedroom door behind me. Boards. I needed the boards back on. Nail it shut. Seal it up again like Dad had. But as I stumbled into the living room, gasping, I saw something that made me skid to a halt. The front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the wind. And in the middle of the doorway, a mitten, child-sized, torn thumb, yellow stain, waiting. I didn't touch the mitten, didn't even get close. Instead, I kicked the front door shut so hard it rattled in its frame and locked the deadbolt with trembling fingers. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, forehead pressed against the cool wood. Outside, the wind howled against the house, and somewhere beyond the fence, something laughed. Not a real laugh, not human. A sound stitched together from broken pieces of voices scraping against each other. The house felt small suddenly, like a trap. I needed answers, real ones. Not dreams, not memories, not riddles left in shoeboxes. I grabbed my keys, shoved the Polaroid and Jack's notebook into my bag, and got into my rental car without looking back. There was only one person left in Solomon Falls who might talk to me, Sheriff Elias Sanchez, the man who had overseen the investigation into Jack's disappearance, the man who had, I suspected, buried a lot more than evidence. The sheriff's station sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building that looked more like a bomb shelter than a place of law. I pulled into the empty parking lot and cut the engine. Every instinct screamed at me to drive away, but I forced myself forward, pushing through the heavy glass doors into the dim, fluorescent-lit lobby. A woman in a tan uniform sat behind the front desk, her face pale and tight with worry. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair toppled over behind her. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I opened my mouth to respond, but heavy boots clomped down the hallway and a familiar figure appeared. Sheriff Sanchez. Time hadn't been kind to him. His once broad shoulders were stooped, his hair nearly all grey. Deep lines carved his face like dry riverbeds. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Recognition flickered, and then something colder. Not anger, not pity, fear. "You're Kara Hansen," he said finally. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I need to talk to you," I said. "It's about Jack." He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder at the darkened hallway. Then he jerked his head toward a door labeled Interrogation Room 1. "In here," he muttered. The room was bare except for a battered table and two metal chairs. A single buzzing light hung overhead. I sat down, laying the Polaroid carefully on the table. Sanchez remained standing. "I found this in Jack's room," I said. "And this." I slid the notebook toward him. He didn't touch it, just stared. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and hoarse. "You shouldn't have gone in there." "Why?" I demanded. "What the hell is happening in this town? What's in those woods?" For a long moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, a long, broken sound, and lowered himself heavily into the chair across from me. "You ever hear of the Quincy family?" he asked. I nodded. Everyone knew the story. In 1981, the Quincy's had gone into Donner Woods for a camping trip. Only the mother came out, blood-soaked, screaming. The investigation found pieces of the father and son, never found the daughter. The mother died 2 days later in a padded cell, tearing her own throat out with her teeth. I'd always thought it was just a ghost story. But Sanchez's face told me otherwise. It wasn't an accident, he said, and it wasn't the mother who killed them. He leaned in closer. "There's something old in those woods, older than this town, older than the people who built it. Something that wears you." He tapped the photo with a thick finger. "See that thing behind your brother? It's called a fetch." "A fetch?" He nodded grimly. "A mimic, a spirit, a parasite. It finds someone vulnerable." Someone marked. My stomach turned. "The mittens," I said. He nodded again. "They're the mark, a way of saying, 'You're next.'" My head spun. "So it marked Jack." "And it marked you too," Sanchez said quietly. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The tapping at my window, the dead mother, the fake Jamie. It all clicked into place, a horrible, jagged puzzle. "You tried to stop it?" I asked. He snorted humorlessly. "We tried burning parts of the woods, closing off trails, telling kids stories to scare 'em away." His face darkened. "But you can't kill what doesn't live." I leaned back, heart hammering. "So what do I do?" Sanchez looked old, so much older than before, as he said, "You either run far away and never look back, or you go into the woods and finish what your brother started." A long silence stretched between us. The fluorescent light buzzed louder, as if the building itself were listening. Finally, I asked, "What did Jack start?" Sanchez hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He slid it across the table to me. A key. Rusty, old-fashioned. Attached to it was a tag with a single word scrawled in faded ink. "Cabin." "He was looking for something," Sanchez said. "Something buried in the woods. Something the fetch didn't want him to find." "What is it?" I whispered. The sheriff shook his head. "I don't know." He stood up, wincing as his joints cracked. "But if you go looking, you won't be the only one." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer, just gave me one last look, something between pity and regret, and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the buzzing light and the key. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the key in my hand. Outside, the mist pressed against the station windows like a living thing. In the distance, from the direction of Donner Woods, I heard it again. That awful, warbling scream. It sounded almost eager. The sheriff's station faded into the mist behind me as I drove, the rusty cabin key heavy in my pocket, as if it were trying to drag me down through the seat. Every rational part of me screamed to leave Solomon Falls behind, drive to the airport, fly back to the city. Forget Jack, forget the woods, forget the nightmares already curling at the edges of my mind like smoke. But then I thought about the sweater, the note, the Polaroid, and the mitten still waiting outside my motel door like a patient dog. I couldn't run, not yet, not when I was this close. The road narrowed as I headed north toward the edge of town, the cracked pavement giving way to dirt and gravel. The trees grew thicker here, gnarled black shapes that clawed at the grey sky. A tattered wooden sign appeared ahead, swinging in the wind. Donna Woods, no trespassing. Someone had spray-painted over it in dripping red letters. They're hungry. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, killing the engine. The woods loomed ahead, a black mouth yawning wide. I stepped out of the car, clutching Jack's notebook tight to my chest, and locked the doors behind me, though I wasn't sure what good it would do. The mist pressed close, damp and cold, swallowing sound. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, like the earth didn't want to remember me walking on it. I found the trail easily enough, a narrow, overgrown path disappearing into the trees. The sheriff's words echoed in my mind. You either run far away and never look back, or you go into the woods and finish what your brother started. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the path. Immediately it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. The air grew thicker, heavy with the smell of wet earth and something sweeter, something rotten. I walked. The trees closed in around me, their twisted branches knitting together overhead. Every so often I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, shapes darting between the trunks, too tall and thin to be human. But when I turned, there was nothing. Nothing except the whispering of the leaves, saying things just out of hearing. The farther I went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees leaned too far toward the path, as if trying to block me. The mist seemed to twist itself into faces, faces I recognized and didn't. Once I caught a glimpse of my mother's smile carved into the mist itself, her mouth far too wide, her teeth too many. I didn't stop. Couldn't. Jack had walked this path. I had to follow. After what felt like an hour, the trail forked. One path sloped downhill into thicker fog. The other climbed a rocky hill where the trees grew sparse. I pulled out Jack's notebook, flipping through the pages with frozen fingers until I found a map he'd sketched. The cabin was supposed to be on the hill. I chose the right fork, boots crunching over gravel, heart hammering louder than my footsteps. As I climbed, the wind picked up, whistling through the bare branches. And then I heard it. A faint, wet slapping sound behind me. Footsteps, not normal ones. They sounded wrong, like something dragging itself forward, half limping, half sliding over the rocks. I didn't turn around. I didn't dare. Instead, I broke into a run, stumbling up the hill, branches clawing at my clothes, at my face. The thing behind me picked up speed. The footsteps grew faster, wetter, the slapping sound louder. Breathing ragged, I burst through the last line of trees, and there it was, the cabin. It crouched at the top of the hill, half sunken into the earth, its roof sagging under the weight of dead leaves. One window was shattered, the door hung ajar. Something moved inside, just a flicker of motion, but I had no choice. I sprinted across the clearing, shoved the key into the rusty lock, and wrenched the door open. Inside, it was dark and damp. The smell hit me first, mildew, rot, and something sour underneath. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, gasping. Outside, the slapping footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, and then from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. My mother's voice. Kara, honey, open the door. It's cold out here. My body seized up. It wasn't her, I knew that. I'd seen what wore her face before. I squeezed my eyes shut, fists clenching until my nails dug into my palms. Please, sweetie, the voice whined. You wouldn't leave your mother outside, would you? I stayed frozen, silent. Eventually the voice gave a wet, choking sound, like a laugh being smothered, and the footsteps shuffled away. I didn't relax. Not yet. Not ever. Slowly, I turned to face the cabin's interior. It was one room. A broken table, a mouldy mattress, a fireplace filled with ash, and something that looked disturbingly like bones. But what drew my eye was the far wall. Something was carved into the wood there, deep and jagged, as if done in a hurry. I approached it, heart sinking with every step. It wasn't words, it was a map. Another map. And at the center, marked with a crude X, were two words scratched deep enough to splinter the wood. The nest. I reached out and touched the carving. The wood was wet. Sticky. When I pulled my hand back, it was stained red. Not paint. Blood. Behind me, the door creaked, slowly, painfully, like it was being pushed open again. And from the threshold came a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years, a voice that froze the blood in my veins. "Kara," Jack said, "I found it. I found the nest. You have to help me." I turned around and saw my brother, or what was left of him. I stood frozen, the blood still tacky on my fingertips, staring at the boy in the doorway. Jack. He looked almost exactly as I remembered. Same mop of messy brown hair, same gangly limbs, same mint green sweater, the one I'd received in the mail. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. His eyes were too wide, the whites too bright. And when he smiled, the corners of his mouth twitched upward just a fraction too far. "Jack," I whispered, though my body screamed to run. He stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under his sneakers. "I missed you," he said in a voice that almost sounded like his, but there was no warmth behind it. No real feeling, just a hollow imitation, like a recording played back on broken speakers. I took a cautious step backward, heart hammering against my ribs. Jack's head tilted sharply, unnaturally, like a bird studying prey. "You got my sweater," he said. "You followed the trail, just like you're supposed to." Something squirmed beneath his sweater, something under his skin. I could see it now, a bulge moving from his shoulder down to his elbow like a rat trapped inside him. My stomach churned. This wasn't Jack. Whatever it was, it wore him like a costume. "You're not him," I whispered. The thing's smile widened into something grotesque, its teeth sharpened, lengthened, so subtly I would have missed it if I blinked. "I'm what's left," it said, and then softer, almost pleading. "Come to the nest, Kara. You'll understand. You'll see him again. The real Jack. He's waiting." My throat tightened, tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "Where is he?" I croaked. The thing took another step closer, and this time I could smell it, a sickly, sweet stench of decay and wet leaves. "In the heart of the woods," it whispered. "Where we all go eventually." It extended a hand to me, Jack's hand, small and familiar and trembling. For one agonizing second, I almost reached for it. Almost. Then something in Jack's notebook flashed into my mind, a warning he'd scrawled in furious handwriting: "Don't trust the ones who look like us. They're not us anymore." I staggered backward. "No," I said, voice shaking but firm, "I'm not going anywhere with you." The thing's face twitched. Its mouth dropped open, too wide, unhinging like a snake's, and from deep within its throat came a sound that wasn't human, a wet, gurgling hiss. The air grew colder. The cabin walls seemed to pulse and breathe around us. From somewhere outside, a chorus of whispers rose, echoing Jack's voice, my mother's voice, the voice of every memory I had ever loved. "Kara!" they moaned. "Join us!" The thing lunged. I spun, ducking low, and bolted for the broken window. Glass tore at my jacket, at my skin, but I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I hit the ground running, my boots skidding in the mud. Branches whipped at my face as I plunged back into the woods, heart hammering, lungs burning. Behind me, I heard the thing shriek, a sound like metal grinding against bone, and the whispers followed. I ran until I could run no more, collapsing against the trunk of a dead tree. Somehow I had circled back to the lower trail, the one that had disappeared into the thicker fog. I had a choice: go back toward town, or follow the second path deeper toward whatever horror waited at the nest. The smart choice was obvious. Get out, go home, let the woods keep their secrets. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't. Not if there was even the slightest chance Jack was still alive in there, still fighting. Somehow, I wiped the blood from my hands onto my jeans, straightened up, and pulled Jack's notebook from my jacket. The pages had gotten damp, the ink bleeding at the edges, but one message remained clear. A final scrawl on the last page. The nest is beneath the old well. If you hear them call your name, don't answer. They lie. They always lie. I folded the notebook and tucked it away. The fog swallowed me as I pressed onward, down the lower trail. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the earth itself wanted to drag me under. And as I walked, the woods changed. The trees grew thicker, darker, their trunks bloated and knotted like tumors. Faint shapes moved just beyond the mist, tall, skeletal things with two long arms and no faces. They watched, but they didn't follow. Not yet. The path narrowed until it was little more than a deer track, winding between massive roots and fallen logs. And then, at last, I saw it. A clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone well, half collapsed and covered in moss. The air around it buzzed, a low insectile hum that set my teeth on edge. I crept closer, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to run. The well seemed to breathe, the stones pulsing in and out like a rotten lung. Something moved inside it, a shadow shifting deep within. And then a voice rose from the darkness, soft and broken. "Help me, Kara," it whispered. Jack's voice. I stood frozen at the edge of the well. Tears streamed down my face. It sounded like him. God, it sounded just like him. But the notebook's warning echoed louder. They lie. They always lie. Still, what if he was really down there? What if he had been trapped all this time, waiting for someone to find him? I dropped to my knees and peered into the darkness. I couldn't see the bottom. The air that rose from the well was cold and wet, and smelled faintly of blood. "Jack?" I called, voice trembling. A hand shot up from the darkness, not a normal hand. It was long and thin and dripping with black slime, fingers ending in broken claw-like nails. It grabbed the edge of the well, pulling itself up, and what emerged wasn't Jack. The hand that emerged from the well wasn't Jack's. It was too thin, too long. Its fingers looked wrong, crooked, like they had been bent backward too many times. A wet, gurgling sound echoed from the depths, followed by a low scraping noise. Someone was pulling itself out of the well. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest as the thing crawled fully into the light. It was humanoid, but only barely. The skin was stretched too tight across the bones, grey and mottled like wet paper. Its face was a twisted mess of features, like a mask that had been hastily constructed and then torn apart, leaving behind something more monstrous than human. The eyes were the worst. Empty sockets stared at me, dark and hollow, but I could feel it watching. I could feel its hunger. It dragged itself out of the well, its limbs jerking at strange angles, leaving a trail of thick black slime behind. And then it spoke. "Jack ... The voice was garbled, choked with something not quite air, not quite sound. It sounded like my brother, at first, but it wasn't. "Jack," I whispered, voice trembling, barely able to form the words. The thing nodded once, its head jerking forward with a sickening snap. "Yes, Jack," its lips twisted into a grotesque approximation of a smile. "Jack is here. Jack is me." My stomach lurched. It wasn't Jack, not anymore. The thing's arms stretched out, impossibly long, fingers curling like claws. It moved closer to me, its breath heavy, wet, and rank with rot. I staggered back, my pulse pounding in my ears, my legs threatening to give out from under me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. "What are you?" The thing tilted its head, as though considering the question. Then slowly it opened its mouth. "That is complicated," it rasped, the words slithering out in a voice that was both familiar and foreign. "We are many. We are one. We are the nest." It stepped forward again, its legs moving in slow, calculated strides. "Jack was never yours to keep," it said. "He was ours. He always was. You just didn't know." I swallowed hard, trying to push the growing terror in my chest back down. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, voice cracking as the creature loomed over me, its presence suffocating. The thing's face twitched, and I could swear I saw a flicker of recognition in its hollow eyes. For a moment it almost seemed sad. Then it grinned again, that hideous, unnatural smile. "We want you to join us, to be part of the nest," it said, its voice soft, coaxing. "You've already started, Kara. You've walked the path. Now you must finish it." The ground beneath me seemed to shift, the earth giving a low groan. The trees in the clearing bent toward the well, their branches reaching out like long skeletal hands. And then I understood. This wasn't just a creature. It wasn't just Jack. This was the nest. This was what had been pulling at me from the moment I stepped into the woods. This thing, they, were the reason Jack had disappeared, the reason the mittens had appeared at my doorstep, the reason I had received his sweater. They were what had been waiting for me. "You want me to become one of you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the horror of it all sinking in. The thing nodded, its head jerking in a motion that was almost too fast, too sharp. "Yes," it said, voice dripping with something ancient and sinister. "We are many. We are one. We are the nest." It stepped forward again, and this time I didn't retreat. I couldn't. The air around me was thick with the scent of decay, of something wrong, something that shouldn't be. The thing stretched out its arm, its fingers closing around my wrist with a grip that felt like ice. It tugged gently at first, urging me toward the well. The whispers rose again, soft and insistent. "Join us. Be part of us. You are one of us." I forced my eyes to focus. I wasn't going to let it pull me in. I couldn't. Not like Jack. The memories of my brother flooded back, his smile, his laugh, his anger when we fought, his warmth when we hugged. The Jack I knew was still out there somewhere. Not here. Not in this thing. With a sudden surge of strength, I wrenched my wrist free from its grip. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger, defiant. "I'm not like you." The thing's grin faltered for a moment, its eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice, Kara. You never did." The air around me grew colder, the mist swirling tighter, closer, as though the woods themselves were closing in. "Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe." I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on me, hidden, watching, waiting. But then something shifted. A sound, a crack, a thud. I turned. From the direction of the well, something else was moving. A figure stumbled into the clearing. It was human. Almost human. It was Jack. Not the thing in front of me. Not the twisted creature that wore his face. But my brother. He was alive. Or at least something that was once alive. His face was pale, bloodshot, his hair matted and wild, his clothes torn and ragged. But it was him. It was really him. His eyes locked on mine, and for a split second I saw something like recognition there. Something like hope. "Kara," he rasped, voice weak, hoarse, "get out of here. You can't be here." The thing in front of me hissed, a low guttural sound that rattled my bones. "Jack," it growled, "you're ours. You can't leave. You belong to us." Jack's eyes flickered, and in that moment I saw the truth. He was trapped. Trapped in a way I couldn't even begin to understand. But he was still in there. Somewhere. And he was telling me to leave. Telling me to run. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to question. I turned and ran. Ran toward Jack. Ran toward the woods. Ran toward freedom. The thing behind me screamed. The nest howled in fury, and the forest seemed to close in on me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Jack was still out there, and I wasn't leaving without him. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, the dead leaves and mud slipping underfoot, my breath ragged and shallow. Behind me, the thing, the creature that wore Jack's face, screeched, its voice rising into a high, shrill wail that echoed through the trees. The whispers were deafening now, the entire forest alive with them. They were calling my name. "Kara, come back to us. Come to the nest." The weight of their voices crushed down on me, pushing me forward, urging me to stop, to look back, to give in. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop. Not until I had Jack. Not until I understood what had happened to him. The trees were blurring past me, their gnarled branches reaching out like claws, But I didn't dare slow down. I couldn't let myself think about what was chasing me. Instead, I focused on Jack. The real Jack. Not the thing pretending to be him. The real Jack, who had somehow survived down here in this nightmare for all these years. I didn't know how I knew, but I could feel it. Somewhere in the woods, Jack was waiting for me. He was close. I ran for what felt like hours, the fog growing thicker with each step, until at last I saw a flicker of movement ahead. A figure. I froze, my pulse quickening, breath catching in my throat. It was him, my brother, Jack. He was standing by an old stone wall, half covered by moss and vines, staring out into the dense woods. His back was to me, but I could see him clearly, the familiar outline of his body, the tattered edges of his sweater. I didn't hesitate. I called his name. Jack. He turned slowly, and for the first time since I'd seen him in the well, I saw something human in his eyes. Something familiar. Kara, he said, his voice weak, strained. You shouldn't be here. You have to leave. His words were like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to leave. Not now. Not when I was so close to bringing him back. I'm not going anywhere, I said, stepping closer. I'm getting you out of here, Jack. You've been trapped long enough. Jack's face twisted, his eyes flickering with something darker. No, he whispered, shaking his head. You don't understand. You don't know what it is. What I've become. I took another step forward, heart pounding in my chest. What are you talking about? You're my brother. You're still Jack. His eyes met mine again, and this time I saw the desperation in them, the fear. I was, he said softly, his voice cracking. But I'm not anymore. Not the way you think. I reached out, my hand trembling, and gently touched his arm. Then tell me what's going on. Please, Jack. I need to understand. I need to help you. For a moment it seemed like he might say something that would explain everything. But then the ground shook, a deep rumbling tremor that made the trees sway and the air thicken. Jack's eyes widened in terror. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Before I could ask what he meant, the earth cracked open beneath us. A massive fissure split the ground, sending chunks of dirt and stone tumbling into the void. From the depths of the crack came a horrible sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very bowels of the earth. The nest. The true heart of the nest. I stumbled backward as the ground continued to quake, and I watched in horror as Jack's body began to twist and convulse. It wasn't just him anymore. It was something else. Something that had taken him, corrupted him, and was now trying to pull him back into the depths. No, I cried out, reaching for him. But Jack's eyes glazed over, his mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that came out. You belong to us. I screamed, reaching for him, but the ground was collapsing beneath my feet. The crack widened, and the earth seemed to swallow him whole. Before I could react, the void beneath him closed, and he vanished from my sight. I dropped to my knees, the weight of what I had just seen crashing down on me. This wasn't Jack anymore, not in any real sense. It was something else, something hungry. And now I understood. The nest wasn't just a group of creatures, it wasn't just the thing that had worn Jack's face, it was an entity. A thing that lived beneath the earth, beneath the woods, beneath everything. It had been waiting for years, feeding on the lost, the forgotten, and Jack had become one of its victims. I trembled, my mind racing to make sense of everything. The mittens, the sweater, the visions of our mother, the whispers. It was all connected, and I had walked right into it. I stood, my legs unsteady, and looked around. The mist had thickened even more, and I could barely make out the outlines of the trees. But the air was different now, charged, alive with something dark, something that wasn't just in the woods, but was the woods. The nest was reaching out, drawing me in. But I wasn't going to let it. I couldn't. The only way out was to face it head on, to find the heart of the nest, to break it. And I had one last chance. The well, the source, but I didn't know what I would find when I reached it, whether I would face Jack again, or something worse, but there was no turning back now. I would either stop the nest or become its next victim. The air felt different now, heavier, like the woods themselves were alive, watching me with 1,000 unseen eyes. Every step I took seemed to echo back at me from the trees, each footfall soft, swallowed by the thick fog that clung to the earth like damp cloth. I had to keep moving. Jack, if that thing I saw in the woods could even be called Jack, was gone, vanished into the deep, dark void of the nest, and I was running out of time. The ground beneath my feet continued to tremble, the low guttural growls from below growing louder with each passing second. Whatever had swallowed my brother was growing restless, hungry. It was aware of me now, and it was getting closer. I had no choice but to go deeper. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath came in ragged gasps, my legs burning with exhaustion, but I pushed myself faster, ignoring the sharp sting of branches as they scraped across my skin. I didn't have much time. The fissure that had swallowed Jack had left a scar in the earth, a jagged wound that seemed to pulse with dark energy. I felt it, deep in my bones, the pull of something ancient, something hungry, calling me forward. It was here, in the heart of the woods, that I would either find my brother or lose myself forever. And there it was, the well. It was smaller than I remembered, a simple stone structure half buried in the earth, moss and ivy creeping up its sides like fingers reaching to hold it in place. But the air around it felt wrong, sick. The thing in the woods, whatever had taken Jack, was here, beneath the surface, and now, standing at the edge of the well, I could feel its presence all around me. Like it was waiting, watching, for me to make my next move. I knelt beside the well, peering into the darkness below. There was nothing to see, just blackness, stretching down into infinity. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I might find if I looked deeper. But there was no choice. Jack's sweater, the mittens, the cryptic notes, they had all led me here. This was the source, the heart of the nest. I reached down, my hand trembling, and brushed the cold stone of the well's edge. And then the whispers started. They were soft at first, like a breeze through the trees, but quickly grew louder, more insistent. "Kara, come closer. It's waiting for you." I clenched my fists, forcing the voices back. The nest wanted me. It had been drawing me in from the moment I set foot in this cursed town. But I wasn't going to give in. Not now, not when I was this close. Taking a deep breath, I bent down and peered into the well again. This time, something was different. I saw a faint glow, far down below the surface, a pale light flickering like a candle in the dark. I wasn't sure what I was seeing, whether it was real or some twisted vision the nest had planted in my mind, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to go down. Without another thought, I grabbed the rope that hung loosely by the side of the well, its fibers worn and frayed by time. I tied it around my waist, the knots tight and secure, and started to climb down, the cool stone scraping against my palms. The further I descended, the stronger the pull became, the whispers rising around me until they were all I could hear. "You're so close, Kara. You're almost there." My breath came faster as I descended deeper, the light below growing brighter. I couldn't tell how far I had gone, how deep into the earth I had traveled, but I felt the weight of something pressing in on me, something vast, something ancient. And then I reached it, the bottom. I landed with a soft thud, my legs trembling as I steadied myself. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to gather my bearings. The air was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of earth and decay. The glow I had seen earlier was now more pronounced, coming from a massive, pulsating, root-like structure that stretched out before me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a writhing mass of vines and tendrils that seemed to move of their own accord, coiling and uncoiling like something alive. And then I saw it. In the center of the root structure, suspended in mid-air, was Jack's sweater. It hung there, fluttering slightly as though caught in an unseen breeze. The mint-green fabric was torn and frayed, the edges stained with something dark. Something that wasn't just dirt. Blood. My brother's blood. I stumbled forward, my heart hammering in my chest, as I reached out for it. But before I could touch the sweater, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the cavernous space. "You should not have come." I froze. It wasn't the voice of Jack. It wasn't the voice of the creature that had taken him. It was something else, something older, something that didn't belong in this world. The air around me seemed to grow thicker, heavier, as if the very walls of the earth were closing in on me. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, tall, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood of shifting tendrils. Its presence was suffocating, an overwhelming force of power and malevolence. And then it spoke again. The nest is eternal. Its voice was the sound of 1,000 voices, each one layered over the other, overlapping and melding together into something incomprehensible. You will join us. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just the nest. It was the heart of it. It was what had taken Jack. It was what had been waiting for me all these years. But I wasn't going to become a part of it. I couldn't. With one final glance at the hanging sweater, I turned and ran. Ran toward the darkness, toward the wall of writhing roots, toward the only way out. The whispers rose again, louder, more desperate, but I didn't look back. Not this time. I couldn't. I had one chance to escape, one chance to save what was left of my brother, and I wasn't going to waste it. I ran. My legs burned, my chest heaved with each breath, the air growing thick, oppressive. The walls of the cavern seemed to close in on me with every step I took. The writhing tendrils of the nest reached for me, brushing against my skin like cold fingers, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't look back. Not now. The thing, whatever it was that had emerged from the depths, was still behind me, its presence filling the cavern with an overwhelming weight. Its voice, the voice of 1,000 voices, reverberated through my mind. It wasn't just trying to trap me in this place, it was trying to control me, to make me one of them. You will join us. The words echoed, a whisper in my ear that I couldn't shake. I stumbled through the darkness, my heart racing. My fingers brushed against the stone walls, slick with dampness. The only light in this hellish place came from the sickly glow of the writhing roots, pulsing in time with the sounds of the nest's breath. And then I heard something else, a faint scratching sound, a whisper of movement. I stopped, frozen in place. I wasn't alone anymore. It was him. Jack. I didn't have to see him to know. The sound was unmistakable, the scraping of something dragging across stone, followed by a low, guttural growl that made my blood run cold. He was here, but it wasn't Jack. Not anymore. I turned around, heart pounding in my throat, my eyes darting through the darkness. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion, but there was no time to think, only to act. I had to find him. I had to find Jack. I stepped forward cautiously, every muscle in my body tense, ready to spring at any sign of danger. And then I saw him, Jack. But it wasn't him, not really. Not anymore. His body was twisted, malformed, hanging from the ceiling like a puppet, strings of dark, vine-like tendrils wrapped around his limbs, pulling him this way and that. His eyes were wide open, but they were empty, soulless, clouded with something dark, something that had replaced the brother I had once known. Jack? The word left my lips before I could stop it, but the creature, whatever it had become, didn't respond. It just hung there, swaying gently in the air, a grotesque mockery of my brother. The same dread I had felt earlier returned, clawing at my chest, but I pushed it down. This wasn't my brother anymore. This was the nest, and it had taken him. I couldn't let myself break down. I couldn't fall apart now. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move forward, toward the writhing mass that was once Jack. I didn't know what I was going to do, what I could possibly do, but I knew I couldn't leave him like this. Not when I still had a chance to stop it. The creature's head turned toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. It made a low, clicking sound with its mouth, like the chattering of teeth, and for a moment I thought it might attack. But then it stopped. It was staring at me, waiting. I knew it wasn't Jack. Not anymore. And yet I felt a pang of guilt. I had to save him. I had to get him back. The vines that held him began to twitch, reacting to my presence. The nest was waking, the roots vibrating with an unnatural energy. It could feel me, feel my defiance, and it didn't like it. I reached for the ground, my fingers scraping against the cold stone, and pulled a loose rock from the floor. It wasn't much, but I could use it to break the tendrils, to free Jack, or whatever was left of him. But as I raised the rock, the nest reacted. The walls of the cavern groaned, the roots pulling tighter, twisting around me like a living thing. The air grew thick with pressure, and I gasped for breath, feeling the crushing weight of it closing in. And then the whispers started again. Louder this time, more frantic. "Join us. You belong here, Kara. This is your place. Come and take your place in the nest. You are one of us now." I shook my head, trying to push the voices out of my mind. This was the nest's final play. It wanted to pull me into its web, to break me down until I joined it willingly. But I couldn't. I had come too far. I couldn't let it win now. The ground trembled beneath me. The creature that had once been Jack let out a high-pitched screech, its mouth opening wider than should have been possible, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It was no longer the brother I had known. It was something else, something monstrous. The roots surrounding me began to constrict, pulling tighter, but I refused to stop. I wasn't going to let it take me. I ran, straight toward the creature, straight toward the heart of the nest. The world around me blurred as I sprinted, the cavern collapsing in on itself. The walls seemed to bend and shift, distorting reality as the nest's power grew stronger. The ground quaked violently, but I kept running, ignoring the fear gnawing at my insides. The roots snapped at my heels, but I dodged them, using the strength I had left to push forward. And then, just as I was about to reach the writhing mass that held Jack captive, a force slammed into me, knocking me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my body, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I looked up, and through the blur of the writhing mass of roots and shadows, I saw it. The nest. The heart of it. And it was alive. I had come here to stop it, to break it. But now I wasn't so sure. Could I even escape it? Could I escape Jack? The thing that had taken him, that had taken everything from me, was staring right at me. And I realized something then. It wasn't just Jack I had to save, it was myself. The nest was feeding off my fear, my guilt, my grief. If I didn't find a way to break its hold, I would become part of it. I would be just another victim, another twisted creature hanging in the dark. I had to end it. Before it ended me. I could hear the nest now, not just in my ears, but in my bones, in the marrow. It was a low hum, a steady thrum beneath the surface, vibrating through the walls and through my skull, as though the very earth was alive and breathing. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a gnawing silence, the kind that comes when you've been hollowed out from the inside. It had me. It was in my head, my soul, my every thought, pressing down on me, making my limbs feel like lead. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't give in. I had to push through. For Jack. For myself. I stood shakily, my muscles trembling under the weight of the nest's presence, but I didn't fall. I couldn't. Not now. In front of me, the twisted, malformed shape that had once been my brother, Jack, hung from the ceiling, writhing in the vines that held him in place. He wasn't human anymore. He was something else. A creation of the nest. A trap for the living. Something that had been warped beyond recognition by whatever dark force lived in these woods. His eyes, still wide and vacant, met mine. There was no recognition in them, only darkness, nothing but a hollow void. The nest was feeding off of him, off of his body, off of the memory of who he had been. It was turning him into part of the web, a victim, a tool. But I wasn't going to let it take me, not like that. I took a deep breath, grounding myself, forcing myself to focus. The air was thick with that suffocating pressure. The walls were closing in, the roots coiled around me, trying to pull me into their grip. I couldn't let it happen, not now. The nest wanted me to be afraid. It wanted me to surrender to it. But I refused. I could feel the energy in the air, the raw, unnatural power that pulsed from the heart of the nest. It was almost intoxicating, a force like nothing I'd ever encountered before. It was the thing that had taken Jack. It was the thing that had taken everything from me. And it wanted me. It wanted my soul. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts. Focus. I had to get him back. I had to get Jack back, but first, I had to understand it. The nest. What it was. How it worked. It wasn't just a creature. It was an ancient force, a parasite. It fed on memories, on pain, on fear, on grief. It thrived on loss. And I had given it all. I had given it Jack. I had given it my family. I had given it my life. I had given it everything. But I wasn't going to give it my soul. I took another step forward, my breath ragged. I felt the ground tremble beneath me, and the roots reacted, pulling tighter, closer. But I didn't stop. Jack's body twisted in the vines. His mouth opened, emitting a low, unnatural hiss. But it wasn't him speaking. It was the nest. It was trying to lure me in, to convince me that he was still in there, still alive, still my brother. But I wasn't fooled. It was using him. It was using everything it could to break me. And then I heard it. The voice. Kara. It was a whisper, soft and familiar. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't flinch. It sounded like Jack. But it wasn't Jack. It was the nest. It was pretending. I couldn't listen. I couldn't fall for it. The glowing light in the center of the cavern pulsed, brighter now, as if the nest was feeding off my hesitation. I needed to act. I couldn't wait any longer. If I didn't do something now, it would be too late. I would be lost, just like Jack. The roots lashed out, but I was ready. I ducked, sliding past them, barely avoiding their grasp. My hands scraped across the stone floor, but I didn't care. I had to reach Jack. I reached for the vines, my fingers closing around them, feeling the cold, slick texture. The roots tightened around my wrists, pulling me in, but I fought them off, tearing at them with everything I had left. I had to save him. With a final desperate cry, I pulled the last of the vines off Jack's body, and he fell to the floor with a sickening thud. For a moment there was nothing, no movement, no sound. But then slowly he stirred. I held my breath. Was it really him? Was this finally the moment? But when he opened his eyes, I saw it. The same hollow, empty gaze that had haunted me for so long. He was gone. Not in body, but in spirit. The nest had taken him. It had twisted him into something else. And then I realized the truth. There was no bringing him back. Not now. The nest had fed on him, absorbed him, turned him into one of its own. And now it was trying to do the same to me. The roots closed in again, this time faster, with more force. They wrapped around my arms, my legs, my chest, pulling me into their grip. I struggled, but the strength of the nest was too much. It was everywhere, suffocating me, swallowing me whole. I had a choice to make. I could fight, or I could let go. The nest wanted me to give in. It wanted me to become part of it, to let it consume me. But if I did, I would be lost. I would be like Jack, just another twisted thing in its web. I had to make one final choice, to fight, or to surrender. And then I understood. The nest didn't just feed on loss, it fed on choice, the choice to fight, the choice to give in. It needed that. It needed me to choose. I knew what I had to do. I reached deep inside, summoning the last of my strength. With a final, forceful push, I ripped myself free from the roots, stumbling back toward the entrance of the cavern, the darkness closing in around me. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to become part of the nest. I wasn't going to let it take me. Not now, not ever. I was running. My legs burned with exhaustion. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the pulsating hum of the nest behind me, its roots snapping and crackling, trying to catch me, to drag me back into its clutches. But I wasn't going to let it. Not this time. Every step I took felt like it was pulling me deeper into the ground, the weight of the darkness pressing down on me, trying to suffocate me. The walls of the cavern seemed to close in on all sides, the shadows stretching out to swallow me whole. But I pushed forward. I had to. There was no other choice. Behind me I could hear the nest, its whispers, its laughter, its endless hunger. It wanted me, it wanted my soul, it wanted my fear. But it wasn't going to get it. Not now, not ever. I stumbled over a loose rock, but I caught myself, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The exit was near. I could see the faint outline of the caves opening up ahead, a sliver of light piercing the darkness like a lifeline. But I wasn't safe yet. The roots lashed out, wrapping around my legs, tugging at me, pulling me back toward the heart of the nest. I fought against them, kicking and thrashing, my hands scrabbling against the stone floor, trying to find purchase. My muscles screamed in protest, but I refused to give in. I wasn't going back. Not to that place, not to the thing that had stolen my brother. The walls around me trembled, a low, deep rumble vibrating through the earth. The cavern was alive, and it was angry. The nest was fighting back. But I couldn't let it win. I wouldn't let it win. I reached forward, my fingers brushing the cold, rough surface of the cavern's entrance, and with a final desperate lunge, I pulled myself free from the nest's grasp, collapsing into the open air outside. The light was blinding, the fresh air tasted like freedom. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not until I was sure the nest couldn't reach me. I scrambled to my feet, my body shaking with exhaustion, my head spinning from the ordeal. But I forced myself to keep moving, to keep running, to put as much distance between myself and the cavern as possible. Behind me, I heard the sound of the nest's roar, a monstrous guttural growl that shook the very ground beneath me. It was angry, furious, but it was distant, fading, and I knew then that it wasn't following me anymore. It had been defeated, for now. I stopped, gasping for breath, my hands on my knees, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on me. The past 10 years, Jack's disappearance, the mittens, the visions, the sweater, the nest, everything was swirling in my mind, like a storm I couldn't escape. I had faced the nest, I had confronted it, and I had made it out. But what now? Jack was gone. The nest had taken him. It had taken so much from me, and yet, I was still here. I turned back to look at the entrance to the cave, now nothing more than a dark, gaping hole in the earth. It seemed smaller now, less menacing, as if it had lost some of its power when I escaped. But I knew better. The nest was always waiting, always hungry. It wasn't truly gone, but neither was I. I was alive. I was free, and that had to count for something. But the question lingered. What happened to Jack? Was he truly lost, or had he too escaped? Was he trapped somewhere in the dark, somewhere inside the nest's twisted web? I had no answers, not yet. But I would find them. I couldn't go back to Solomon Falls, not yet. Not until I knew what I was dealing with, until I understood what the nest really was. Until I had a way to stop it. For good. But for now, I took a moment to breathe, to let the reality of what had happened sink in. I had survived, and I would keep fighting. I wasn't going to let the nest take anything else from me. Not ever again. As I turned away from the cave, the first rays of dawn began to break over the horizon. The sky, pale and uncertain, stretched before me like an empty canvas. The town, my home, was miles away, but it felt like a lifetime. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what I would find when I went back. But I knew one thing for sure, the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe.